quick look at this. Right now, Joe and I worked on this, but if you look at your park and recreation, right now, you're getting some money from your CFS, from the funds, about a little over $200,000. The red bars are your expenses. Now, what's happening in between these two bars? Well, you're taking your 1% property tax and interfund loans to fund that. So that's money. For example, there's several $100,000 a year that could have been set aside for water and sewer replacement, but you're funding a service now. I know the service is pretty well liked by everybody, but the point is, how long can you do it? How long can you keep this up? And these are things we'll discuss in a little bit more detail.
You see the numbers, but two things come up. The one park, one of the parks that we have here, we've helped with it.
Yeah.
And the expectation is going to be, and that's one of the things we're not prepared for, because we can talk about the numbers here, and I see where you're talking about the rate increases that can help offset some of that, and if we do nothing. But one of the big problems that I see we're going to face it, and I've talked with Steve about it before, and we know it's coming, is that the expectation, when the folks in this community voted to have the parks, they only looked at page 1, they didn't look at page 2. You're telling us we didn't look at page 2, and now the trains, we're on the track and trains coming, which I get that part there. So the concerns that I have moving forward is that we need to do something sooner than later. And then we have to almost start looking at a public relations issue, because we've created an expectation now that these people may, at some point, may be without, because what you're telling us, at some point, this board's gonna have to make some real firm, hard decisions. We've already, people have attacked me about the rate increase.
Oh, yes.
And I told them before, I says, folks, I pay the same rates you pay. Now, with all that said, I know it's coming, but the part I feel bad about, if you look inside this room here, we have you, and we have only one other person outside this from this community who's here. But we make the decisions to move it forward, but if we told the folks here, we need to go up a little bit more, it would make a little bit more sense if they saw the numbers, because you know what they're going to tell me now? Oh, those are magical numbers. No, those are hard, firm numbers. But again, look who's looking at them. Us inside. Steve's going to look at them, he'll catch the bun of it, and they'll pick us off, and Joe will have to work on them. So that's one of the things that kind of makes me feel bad about this. This impacts my community as a whole. And you have 6 people here looking at the dynamics of it.
I had a question on the Parks and Recreation. Did you play with the numbers a little bit on how much we would need to reduce our parks expenditures? Like, would it look a whole lot better if we reduced our expenditures by 50%?
Well, right now, you'd have to reduce about $750,000 almost. And bear in mind, you're not setting any money aside for replacement of parks either.
Mm-hmm.
See, I hear you, here's the conundrum. The reason we have these workshops is the community isn't, nobody wants to pay more, let's face it. I mean, that just goes to the turf. I've held hundreds of public hearings, and the thing I hear all the time, and the hardest part, when people on fixed income stand up in a public hearing and say, look, I had a graph one time that showed it raised the price like $1 a month or $2. And to most people, working people, I don't like it, but I can handle it. But if somebody walks to you and says, I'm living on Social Security plus another $400 from a pension, how many $2 can I afford to take before I'm hurt real bad? However, I was a manager myself, and I took a lot of heat in public hearings, so I have a lot of empathy, because I was a director for 10 years, and being a director is not a piece of cake, as you well know. It's great to be popular and get the big wages, but when the time comes, they want to kill you.
But I don't even think, this is not a popularity issue. This is a people issue. And I'm looking at, we're looking at this projected out.
Yeah.
Even if I chose to move when my daughter graduates in 4 years, what we have to figure out what we're going to do to move this community forward, because there are some people that will be here. You brought up about the fixed income people. That audience is going to grow on us. The people with fixed incomes, you brought up about the bases. If all these things happen, you just pulled away more working people that are able to pay a little bit more. You bring about, you're talking about the cities or whatever. Every city has the same problem. Their numbers may not be as dynamic, but I'm thinking the back part of my mind, you got a lot of folks up here who are only going to get that much more, whatever the raise may be. We just got a pay raise at work. Well, guess what? The new tax wiped out my pay raise, so I'm back to, you know, and that's gonna happen to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think what we're gonna have to think about, we can't think about even 5 years. We gotta think about that person who's gonna retire in the next 2 or 3 years, who's gonna be on a fixed income moving forward for the next 10 years.
And that's the thing we think about all the time, because in the industry, people used to feel, well, you have to have water, you have to have sewer, there's no charge, so we just charge what it costs. Okay, but the point is, you will identify it. We got more and more people going on fixed income. What are you gonna do? See, over the years, all the laws in California have put more and more restrictions on how we get money. As I said, the lifeline rate, we used to have a lifeline rate for people. That's gone. So to address the fixed income people, we have no more authority. Now, the only way you can get around a fixed income situation, if you have enough 1% property tax money, that you can spend any way you want. However, you're spending it on park and recreation. So if you decide, here's one scenario. Let's assume for a minute we can figure out some way to get a true revenue source for the park and rec people. Balance that out. And not subsidize it with interfund loans or with 1% property tax. If you free up the 1% property tax, one potential use of it is, okay, we're going to put that as a first for a lifeline rate. That would address some of your concerns, right? That's a possibility, because 1% money, the board has full discretion on that. But if we're ready, right now we're using it to basically fund the parks. The other thing we got to worry about is that, again, with the various laws, I was looking at the possibility of maybe a parcel charge or a special tax to help fund this. Now, one of the things that Steve and I talked about, if the community really, really likes park and recreation, maybe we have to bite the bullet and say, okay, will you agree to a parcel charge or a special tax? Let me explain the difference, and this is with the new laws again, what's happened to us. As a special district, after Prop 13, you lost your ability to have a general tax. It used to be you could levy a general tax and run the district taxing the whole community. Now you can't do that, but you can have a special tax by a 2/3 vote for a very special thing. So, for example, if you decided that the park and recreation issue was a big enough issue and the community supported it, you could call for a special election that required 2/3 vote of the electorate. And if they approved it for that, then you funded your park and recreation. People used to use parcel charges a lot for water and sewer and even recreation to some extent. It used to be you write an engineer's report, show what you're going to do with the money, and have the protest hearing. Prop 218 said you go through the same nexus report, all the engineer reports, but then you have to have an affirmative vote by the parcel owner. Now, you have a popular vote for special taxes, but you have a parcel vote by landowners. You have to have, it's a weighted vote. For example, if you're assessed, say, $10 and you're assessed 20, his vote beats you. Obviously, he's paying more. So you have to have a weighted vote situation. Those are a little bit hard to pass. All of them take education and people's support. But I don't know, Steve, if we can't get a special tax or a parcel charge or some help from the county, we can't continue much more in a couple of years, can we, and afford to keep funding parks? But the question I think is important here, would this board support a parcel charge effort or a special tax? Because that's a big part of trying to balance your budget, both for all the recreation and possibly, I know people are looking at, you've got a lot of open land here that's developable, and you're maintaining an infrastructure for that open land. Does it make sense to maybe have a special tax or something for them to contribute to keep this place going?
You got a lot of figures up there, and things look, doom and gloom and things like this, but, this agency has done a lot of things that aren't in those numbers. Several years ago, we replaced over 55 bad valves in our infrastructure. We're in the current process of replacing water meters on a large scale. Every water meter in this community is going to be replaced over the next, what's the timeline on that, Steve?
It's about a 5-year project.
But we're in a 5-year project to do that. We invested in a Vector truck to maintain our sewers. Our sewers are in much better shape than they were a few years ago when we were using the old rotting machine to do it. And so therefore, we can go through our system once a year and clean the lines, and that increases the life immensely on those lines. So I think it, you know, in short of a earthquake, you know, I don't see any major revisions having to be done to our sewer system. We're also been talking about as a board of maybe looking into cameraing our lines to see what kind of condition they're in, to where we can get in there and do the replacements, you know, piecemeal, rather than wait for something catastrophic to happen. Steve and I and Byron, we have, on the engineering committee, we have talked about implementing a computer program that will do just that, as asset management. And several years ago, we implemented a work order program to where to track costs and to streamline things. So there's a lot of things that have been done behind the scenes that won't ever come out on the charts and stuff, that the foresight of this agency and this board has made great strides into, you know, address some of these costs. And, you know, getting to the parks and recreation, it has always been the desire of this board to get funding for it. We've been to the polls twice and failed. Our big question as a board is not, do we want to go and get funding for the parks? Of course we do. Our biggest question as a board is, what is going to have the greatest chance of success? Because we don't want to fail a third time. You know, we want to get out there to where the people are finally going to say yes. And if it's $30 a year or 25, you know, we may not be able to get all the money, but if we get a chunk of it, and then this is, you know, that's our goal. So, and we're just, you know, we realize that there's a lot of things that we can do and not necessarily have to do it by raising water rates and sewer rates. And that's it. We're kind of, you know, I know it's a combination of both, but we got to look for other ways to cut costs, rein expenses in. And I think we've done that with a lot of our preventative maintenance thinking, and to prevent future costs from cropping up, and all of a sudden we've got that $2 million sewer line replacement because we've maintained it, we cambered it, we've gone in there, maybe put a liner in the sewer line when we've noticed some deterioration, you know, and made a fix of it before it becomes a catastrophic failure.
This flow chart is a reflection of what we haven't done.
No.
It is only an assumption and a projection of what possibly we would need to do. It's based on a 3% increase on an annual basis. That's only a guess. And for everything that we do proactively that's not on this chart, it increases our revenue stream. So whatever we do preventively, if we're anticipating a total crash and we prevent that, certainly we're saving revenue. But you can't anticipate that until you take a good snapshot of your entire district, assume the worst, because the worst is going to happen occasionally, and then build from that. Now you can always tweak that, but it won't happen until you have the discussion about, okay, what's our infrastructure replacement program look like? What's the total number? And well, here it is if everything on our assumptions go bad and we have to replace. Okay, what can we do to mitigate that and drive that cost down? Those are the topics that you and I and the board will have in trying to save money. But what we're doing is just looking at, how do we look at a snapshot at our district, and where do we want to go? And here is a 3% assumption. And that's all this is.
Well,
So-
Steve,
And then-
on the assumption, I get all that, but, you know, I guess because my life is always about planning and strategic, this strategic planning, which means if something happens, what do we have in place? So I understand about all the things we're gonna continue to do and we're doing, but we still, that's why I kept asking when you first got here, the reason we wanted to plan, we don't know what the future holds, but we have to have a thought process to get us to the future. And we can save everything today, but you brought up our tanks. Well, 2 years ago, was that 2 years ago when they poured the stuff in the tank? We thought the tank was contaminated. We had to dump, what, 500,000 gallons of water? You know, and we have those things all the time, so your reserves are gonna help, the plans are gonna help, but we still need to have something that when we let the community know, here's the plan, I know it's gonna hurt, but I'd rather hurt and we have a benefit attached to it than to come up here like now with the rate study that I guess you helped us with. People claim they've never seen it, and that's fine. But the scarier part about it is that we're in the 3rd or 4th year of it, and they're still complaining about something, but you just made the comment, we have some of the cheapest water in the state. So they never get it. They'll go buy Starbucks, and they won't think about a $4 cup, but they're getting water at a better price. So I think we all have a notion, but ultimately, I think that let's make sure we have a plan that's gonna meet our needs going forward, because how about the new board that's gonna be sitting up in here in 6 years? You know, that they have a worksheet to move forward, and that the community doesn't get punched too hard in the stomach as we move forward.
See, one of the things I'm hoping will come out of this discussion, for example, we'll present you some policies to start with, because that tells people where you're going. For example, we suggest each of your funds will be in other words, you're not gonna keep borrowing. You're gonna have, each fund carries its own weight. That's a policy, right? And if, for example, if you can't live with that, you say, well, oh geez, we don't wanna do that. But think about it for a moment. If each fund carries its own weight, that means we've gotta solve the revenue problem for Park and Rec. And that's gonna require some ideas. If we say, okay, we want X number of dollars for emergencies and replacement, that's a policy. Some agencies choose like 1 year's of operations. I mean, there's all kinds, we can give you all kinds of examples. But you put those down, we translate them into numbers. So here's what the board says, as you said, this is our plan, here's our picture, here's what results in the way of numbers from that picture. And hopefully the community will buy into it. I mean, that's as simple as I can make it, because once you say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're gonna run our business, this is the amount of reserves we're gonna carry, this is how we replace things. And if you decide that you have good community support, you may say, look, here's our park plan, and we're gonna expand the services. Right now, you can't service what you have, but again, these are decisions that this board has to face too.
Put it forward again for a failure, but we can't go any further or much further on hoping that the people will fund what they want.
Right, we need to stop, either we do the tax, and they tell us we're not gonna pay for it, or we terminate the service to the extent that we can. The CSA can keep some things operating, but take that 1% tax revenue and spend it somewhere else. And maybe initially actually paying back
You pay back.
the other funds.
Well, you know, when Steve and I first talked about what would happen, you know, and that's from what, 6, 7, 8 months ago when we talked about the parks. I think the reality to it that we at some point got into something that we shouldn't have been in, and we can't change it. I think what we look at now, long-term moving forward, what's gonna be the best thing for the community overall, because, you know, it's nice to have a big house, but if you have no lights on, it doesn't make a difference, and that's kind of what we're doing. I saw the people working, you know, the common areas today. That's an expense, the park's an expense. We got a lot of nice expenses, but at the end of the day, you know, how many of these things are doing, they voted the park, if they don't wanna fund the park, that's an issue that they need to make peace with, not us.
Right.
And I don't feel bad anymore, because when I was on Park and Rec, we thought about everything. You aren't gonna get enough grants and scholarships and donations to fund it, so the reality is, you know, folks, it's not there. Here's a choice to get you there, If they say no to it, we all have a say-so. If we say, and if they say no, we go by their word and we move forward, because you brought up the point. If we don't do nothing very soon, the typhoon is gonna hit us next week this time, and that the following year, we're going to be still saying, well, we had an opportunity.
We need to make a decision on it.
And actually, the responsibility of the board to the people, the ratepayers, or on the parks issue, is putting a good parks plan in front of them that they like and that they would be willing to fund. I think when the formation of the district was done, not having a comprehensive plan at that time was the initial defeat. I don't know what happened in the others, but that's why they didn't fund it the first time. It could have very easily passed had they had a real good comprehensive plan. But I think it's our responsibility to put a good plan for the people and say, this is what we intend to do with your money, and then let them make the decision. But that, I think, is our responsibility.
We can see Congress doing the same thing. They need to make a decision. What are they doing? Kicking it down the road, and that's what we've been doing. And I think we need your presentation, I think, is making us see reality, and we need to do that. And maybe the community will step to it.